in the eye and just answer my question. What does original public meaning mean?
It means the meaning that the text of the text as it was understood by the public at the time it became law.
Okay. So you think Brown v. Board of Education was incorrectly decided?
Well, Senator, I think Brown versus Board of Education.
Professor, congratulations. I believe you testified that you think the Constitution should be interpreted according to its original public meaning. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
What does original public meaning mean?
Yes, Senator. So the original part of that phrase refers to the fact that when we look at interpreting a text, we want to interpret it at the time it was.
Professor, look me in the eye and just answer my question. What does original public meaning mean?
It means the meaning that the text of the text as it was understood by the public at the time it became law.
Okay. So you think Brown v. Board of Education was incorrectly decided?
Well, Senator, I think Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided. Scholars who have looked at the original meaning of phrases at that time and the reasoning in that case sometimes question the reasoning of the case.
How many people in the United States of America at the time the Constitution was drafted do you think supported racial integration of schools? You think that was a majority view, do you?
Well, Senator,
at the time. But first, Professor, do you think that was a majority view? Do you think most Americans at the time the Constitution was drafted supported integration of public schools, racial integration?
Well, Senator, I don't know as a sociological matter what percentage of people thought what at that time. I should point out that when we got to Brown versus Board of Education, of course, there had been several fundamental amendments.
But isn't that inconsistent with your statement that you have to interpret it according to original public meaning?
Well, what about the 14th Amendment and the 13th Amendment and the 15th Amendment? So original public meaning would mean with those, well, that would mean we would interpret those amendments and those protections with the understanding of the text and structure at the time those amendments were ratified, which is different, of course, in the 19th century.
Let's go back to Brown v. Board. Look, I think Brown v. Board was correctly decided, and I suspect you do too. But if you say we interpret the Constitution according to the way that people at that time understood it, do you really think that people at that time in America supported racially integrated schools? Do you really believe that?
Well, Senator, I think at the time of the ratification of the 13th, 14th Amendment, and 15th, all which
but
have...
do you think people at that time supported integrated schools?
Well, Senator, on that particular question, I don't know it as a policy matter whether they were thinking about that particular issue. I think they certainly understood that the 14th Amendment, for which a massive part of this country essentially lost lives fighting the Civil War, certainly understood it to require racial equality.
You're not answering my question. I'm trying to understand I'm just trying to understand how you think. It's very easy to say we interpret the Constitution according to its original public meaning, which as I appreciate your testimony, means the way people who read the Constitution at that time interpreted it. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Do you think that most people at that time looked at the United States Constitution and said, well, here it is, big as Dallas, racially integrated schools are required? Do you really believe that?
Senator, I don't know, but
if you don't, I don't think you do, because I think historically that wasn't the case. So how do you square that with the holding of Brown v. Board?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there are several steps in between that have not come up yet in our conversation, which is that you look at the text and structure, which of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments clearly is requiring racial equality. And then over time, that has to be applied to different questions as they arise in context. So if the requirement is that all races be treated equally under the law, and the evidence shows that segregated schools is not doing that, then the requirement could be applied to integrate schools.
When you interpret a statute, you talked about interpreting it according to its plain meaning. What if the statute is ambiguous?
Well, Senator, if the statute...
What do you do if it's ambiguous?
If it's ambiguous on the particular question coming before the court, I start with that phrase, but I also look at the context of surrounding provisions.
No. I understand you define ambiguity as the language plus the surrounding language.
Yes.
I get that part. How ambiguous does it have to be? 51% ambiguous or just a little bit ambiguous?
So I have to say, I would use the same approach essentially in all cases, regardless of the ambiguity, because I would always start with the text, move to the surrounding provisions with the aim of fully understanding what Congress and the president had enacted. And only at that
Professor,
point.
I'm going to run out of time. With respect, answer my question.
Well,
Okay, you're giving me professor talk. How ambiguous does it have to be?
I mean, I think under the Supreme Court's recent precedent in Chevron, it underscored that the court can never just rest and say it's ambiguous. The court has to come up with an answer.
Yeah.
So
So
I
why don't
would,
you just look at legislative history?
well, well, you can't look at legislative history statements one by one because
Why
the
not?
individual
Why not?
intent. Well, Senator, with respect, because this body has its role in our system as an institution, not one by one. So your personal understanding of the law doesn't
This will
matter.
be my last question. I'm sorry. Well, Coons went way over. So you're telling me that it doesn't help you at all to go through and look at the congressional record or read the committee reports or any of that? You don't think that's helpful in interpreting what a statute means?
It depends on the way in which it's being read. If it gives helpful statutory history, if it helps to refer to other portions of context, sure, but not to give it legally binding impact in and of itself. I would always be looking at a broad range of sources and use each of these statements as just one piece of evidence about what people understood the statute to mean at the time. So no, I would never take a piece of legislative history in isolation and give it legal impact.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
We end on that moment. The moment where Senator John Kennedy says, not politely, not academically, not in the gentle mutual admiration dance of elite legal culture, but directly, bluntly, cutting through every polite form the Senate normally hides behind, look me in the eye and just answer my question. That was the moment the room changed, because this was not a hearing about statutory ambiguity. This was not really about Chevron. This was not even about pure originalism versus dynamic interpretation. This was a stress test, a live experiment, a high-stakes audit of epistemic honesty inside a branch of government that increasingly has no capacity, no shared epistemic spine, left. This moment was about whether a future federal judge would be allowed to defer to abstraction instead of moral reality. Kennedy was not actually asking for a legal treatise. He was asking, does your interpretive philosophy produce justice, or does it produce intellectual refuge and moral escape hatches that launder discrimination into methodology? That is why he kept returning to Brown versus Board. He wasn't asking about history of school integration to get a sociology number. He was asking, does your philosophy, when actually applied to a moral crisis, produce a normative result that matches constitutional equality in practice, or does it produce a sterile museum of language? That is the real fight here. And the nominee kept trying to stay safe in epistemic neutral space, in methodological abstraction, in context layers, in mechanical explanation. In the rhetorical safe house the modern legal academy has refined to an art, where no statement is ever fully pinned down long enough to create moral friction. Kennedy refused to let that happen. He forced the collision. He forced specificity. He forced the moment the country is afraid to look at. What if the rhetoric and the performative neutrality of legal language today is actually a way to avoid moral accountability while maintaining the appearance of rigor? Because this is the core problem inside modern American governance. Congress, the courts, regulatory agencies, all are learning to hide inside untestable, unfalsifiable, complexity-based epistemics. Everyone speaks like law review footnotes. Everyone speaks like nothing can ever be known enough to commit to an answer. That is the death of democratic self-governance. This hearing was not about one judge. This hearing was a confrontation with a decaying elite class performance script, a script where people are rewarded for being unpinnable, for being unaccountable, for being so subtle in language that they never have to fully stand in moral daylight. Kennedy dragged that out of abstraction and into the raw room. He was willing to make it uncomfortable, because he understands what the public understands intuitively. If you cannot answer a yes or no question on Brown v. Board without running to methodological shelter, you should not be a federal judge, because the point of law in a republic is not to create a comfortable scholar haven. The point of law in a republic is to restrain power, to protect the vulnerable, to prevent the government itself from rationalizing injustice. Original public meaning is not a museum artifact. It cannot be used as a shield to pretend the most obvious moral truths of American history are unknowable. And if you need a seminar-length justification to explain why Brown was correct, then you have already revealed something foundational about how you will adjudicate the most dangerous, ambiguous real-world cases of this era. When Senator Kennedy said, "Look me in the eye," what he really meant was, stop hiding in the academy. Stop hiding in methodological ambiguity. Stop using jargon to avoid moral clarity. The country deserves judges who can speak moral reality plainly, not just rhetorical complexity elegantly. This is the existential fight for the future of the judiciary. Will America be governed by interpreters who can commit to moral truths in daylight, or by interpreters who are fluent at hiding inside ambiguity so no ruling ever becomes fully attributable to a human moral choice? That is what was on the table. That is why this moment matters far more than this nominee, because this is not the last time we will see this. This is the American theme of the next decade of judiciary politics, where senators are now openly challenging the Academy's slow-motion drift into post-accountability legal philosophy. We are entering a constitutional era where the country is demanding that those who wield state power cannot be unclear about what justice means. In the coming years, this will define judicial confirmations more than ideology ever did. Do you speak in moral daylight, or do you hide inside epistemic fog? This is the real conflict. This hearing made the line visible. The future of the Republic will be determined by which side wins. Subscribe to Congress Signal.